Hi! So today we will be making buttonholes. I've started and I have already created the cut. So first of all, the fabric that you choose, I would recommend it to be wool to practice on because you're most likely going to be doing the handmade buttonholes on wool fabric, on tailored jackets, for example. This one right here has been fused already ahead of time. When it's fused, it already keeps the threads together, so it keeps it quite strong. If you do not fuse it, what you can do is you can get some basting thread and you can just baste around it just a few times just to hold the fabric in place with the fabric underneath it, which is most likely going to be a lining or wool again if it's facing behind it. So what I've done is I've already calculated the length that I need of the buttonhole. So basically you can imagine the button width, it should fit directly through just like that. And then I created a little hole in the top with a buttonhole puncher. Here are two that I have right here, two samples. And then with the scissors, you mark, well, before you mark it, and then with the scissors, just cut it open a very straight line. Do not cut around or do not try to trim too much. I would recommend just making one cut so that it lays down pretty clear like that. So next is I use a needle, a sewing needle. I would recommend the thinner the sewing needle, the better. This one is not the thinnest, but it's one that I do generally work well with. Next, you will need some gimp. So this one is not the best quality. I would recommend getting the better ones, which are a bit more firm and more stiff, because it helps your buttonhole in the end to be a lot more firm and stronger as well. But this is the gimp. So the way I measure how much gimp I need is I add on around, I like to give it enough, so around 2 centimeters further away from the end of your cut. So if my cut is right here, I'm gonna let 2 extra centimeters on that end. Imagine where I'm going to turn here and then go to the end of the cut and add on an extra 2 centimeters, so then I would cut it off right here. So now I have trimmed the gimp appropriately for the size of my buttonhole. What else I will need is some silk thread. So I would also recommend using real silk thread and not the polyester one, just for better quality of buttonholes, but this is quite a good one I use for sampling or for practicing if I need. This one is from Gutermann. I definitely do recommend Gutermann for all kinds of threads. They are very good quality. So this is everything that you will need: the gimp, the silk thread, the needle, the fabric, and the hole puncher to punch this, and then scissors to cut it, as well as also the little poker then in order to poke a quick hole to push through the gimp. So your first step now will be to get some thread on your needle to thread it up. And then what we're going to do is we're going to overlock this area very quickly. So right now, since I've already fused it, I technically do not have to, but it's always recommended to overlock it first just to keep everything in place and to stop the threads from fraying after you've done the buttonhole. So to do that, what I'm going to do is with my thread, this is regular thread, and I would always recommend that you wax your thread beforehand with beeswax, so it's much more firm and stronger as well. What I'm going to do is I'm going to poke from the right side into the wrong side like that and come out right at the end of the buttonhole like that. Point being is that later on, after the buttonhole is done, I'm going to cut this off and then it'll be steady in there. So I'm going to start by doing this. So I go with my needle, I poke in from underneath and around 2 mil, max 3 mil, I poke out like that, and I poke it out from the end of the buttonhole right here. I poke, and using this thread, I flip it over like that. So from down to up, and then I pull. So now it's kind of locked in like this. And I do this all around the buttonhole. And I have to focus that I really stay as consistent as possible. That they all stay around 2 mil or all stay around 3 mil if you wish. But it has to be consistent because this actually gives you a really good foundation for when you actually do the buttonhole with the silk thread. So now as you see, it's kind of looks like that. I would also recommend when doing this that you never tug or pull too hard that it kind of puckers the fabric. I would always recommend that you hand sew this just so that it really lays perfectly tight, but not overly tight. You do not want puckering, you really want it to feel like it's laying down organically well. Very, very smooth. When I come around to the rounded part of the hole, I want to have them a bit closer together, and I sometimes do go a bit smaller inside here just to avoid any extra, tight threads showing afterwards. So then it kind of looks like this. When you come to the end, I always double lock the last stitch. And then from outside of this part, I go through the fabric, come out here, pull, and then I snip. And like I said, this one I can snip as well. So now it's overlocked, and now it's all clean. Next, I cut myself some silk thread. It's always tricky how much to use because you want to make sure it's enough for the whole buttonhole, but you also do not want it to be too much that it starts to tangle. So depending on that, I've roughly cut around. This is probably around 50 centimeters around, like I said. It really depends. I think once you try to do a few buttonholes, you get the hand or the idea of kind of how much you will need. I believe this will be enough for me. So then I start to thread up. What I'm going to do now is if I'm looking at my buttonhole like this, if I'm left-handed, I'm going to start on the right side. And if you're right-handed, you start on the left side. So now with my gimp, that's already pre-cut, it's around this much longer than the actual buttonhole. So that's a good more than 2 centimeters on each side. What I'm going to do first is I'm going to poke from the top around a centimeter away, underneath. Actually, you can also go through the fabric, it's even better. Keeps it all in place. Sometimes you're doing this through lining as well. So it's firm in there. So then I poke out again at the end of the buttonhole. Now this is where it starts. I sometimes, before I add in my gimp, I do a quick stitch, and so this is the same as the overlocking. I curve it around from bottom to up, around the needle. And I tug. Like that. Now I'm going to add my gimp. And it's very important that at the very beginning it's always a bit more tricky and a bit more flimsy. Always. So once you get past the beginning, you will be fine. So I do the exact same thing where with my needle, I go inside and under. And this is where I have to really focus on being consistent throughout the whole buttonhole. So I go through and under. And I circulate, holding the gimp in place, and I tug. Gently and smoothly. So I'm not doing it fast and I'm not doing it slow. And then I tug. I also do not tug too tight. I just tug so I can feel it like almost like a click in place. I can just feel it, that it's like snapped in place. And it's rather best to pull it a little bit like that, or a bit up, but not towards that way. A bit up or towards the inside. All right, the first ones are always a bit flimsy. Well, it feels like they're flimsy. I'm just got to do a few to see how it sits in place. Then I do my next one. Make sure that these stitches really sit next to each other as well. Very, very important that they're very consistent. So I'm doing my next stitch right next to it again. And this only gets better with practice. The first ones will not be perfect. This only gets better with practice. Make sure that each stitch does have a knot. And then you can already feel the gimp is in place. And once it's like that, then you just continue. The same pace, the same rhythm. Very, very consistent stitches. At the circular part, I do the exact same thing, but I make sure that I follow the circular line. So I can bend my gimp a little bit. The firmer the gimp, the better the quality of the buttonhole, and you will see that at the end why. It helps keep more shape and stronger shape as well. But I just follow it all the way around like that. So I can already imagine a bit. And I'd recommend that when you pull the thread, you pull it up. Because after we're done, we're going to iron it down anyways. But better hold it up. So that the little knots are showing towards the upside. If you encounter a little knot that happened accidentally with the thread, because it can happen with the silk thread, just very gently pull it to open it up. Very, very gently. And once you have, you just pull it again, and then it should be gone. When I reach the very, very end, what I do is I go back under and pull a bit, and then do a very, very quick knot right here, just to secure it well and tight. So then this is on hold for a moment. So now I have to have a look. So what we can do here is we can pull it a bit. So if it's a bit wonky, what you can do is you can hold it tight and pull on here. I sometimes like to use this to put in the hole here to keep it round as I tug, on the gimp. And then I just moved around a bit so that it fits. So now what you want to do, what I like to do actually is with this I like to poke 2 holes right here, very, very next to each other, and then I push them through the gimp in each hole so that it comes out in the back. What you also can do if you do not own one of these is you can just push the gimp underneath like this. So they come out on the other side in the back. Like this, so it's nice and flat, nice and clean here, as if there were never any threads there. So now I go back to my needle. And what I want to do here is I want to fix these in place so they're firm. So what I do is through the very thin through the fabric here, I come out and do another knot. And I continue this a few times so that it really locks the gimp in place. Afterwards, I come back to the top and we want to finish it off by doing a very nice, clean stitch. So sometimes I do once, sometimes I do twice. Stitch just through like this. Very, very carefully. I come back up here. And then I just swirl around it like this. So it becomes like a really nice, firm lock. Pretty much like that. Then I go back under once it's done. Go back through to the other side, the underside of the fabric. Then I just do the final lock. Sometimes you can do it along the stitches here because it's really, really firm and tight. Here you can already cut this off. Now we're going to iron it flat and then see the results.